So there's so much going on in the film. There's so many different sort of themes around, sort of, the sort of taboo in the arts and sort of artists and the sort of funding arrangements with institutions, and there's obviously the whole sort of thing around sort of stomach-related illnesses, shall we say. I mean, I don't even know where I can kind of begin to try and unpick what must be going through your mind to have created such a work.
Well, I think that if I could just take one thing from the film, it would be the stomach. Just there was like a frustration that I just wasn't seeing that in film. If I was seeing it, it was done as comedy. And I mean, whatever. I mean, those films can exist, but I just thought, why can't we do something which is more, I don't know what the word is really. It just seems there's so much of it around with autoimmune issues and allergies, and it's like cinema hasn't really caught up with that. And also you kind of see it in society as well. I have a friend of mine, her son is allergic to peanuts, and she was on a plane and this guy was eating peanuts next to her. And she tried to explain to him, and he's going on about his human rights, and it's just, oh God. Gluten-free stuff where it's made on the same surface as a regular pancake, so it just, I don't know. I'm just kind of putting it out there, really, that's all.
I mean, that stuff is all very timely at the moment, isn't it, with recent court cases and people who have passed away in extreme circumstances.
Well, yeah, no, it's really serious. I mean, there's sort of two sides to it. I mean, one is obviously the allergy, which is deadly, or can be, and there's the symptoms, which is celiac in this case, but those symptoms could be anything from irritable bowel to Crohn's and so on. So that was more like a universal thing of just taking something which is taboo and sort of, there's a way of talking about it without being vulgar, I think.
And in terms of your starting point, I mean, are you kind of constantly percolating different ideas, and there's a point then where you're kind of putting pen to paper, or how do you prepare for your sort of screenplays? Well,
this one was kind of a bit different because it started with someone asked me to write a very low budget film for like under $1 million. There was some money. Do whatever you want, you'll get the money. And I wrote this and I didn't get the money. So anything, but not that. And I think in hindsight, I can kind of see why, because I think on paper it reads more like a sequel to Animal House than it does here. I think so much of it is in the acting, especially with Makis. But I think initially it was just, I had this kind of a joke of doing I was in a band, and I called the other two members up. I said, do you mind if I write a film loosely based on us? It's not going to be very complimentary, and they were fine about it. And then within that, because we were dealing with food, it opened up that whole thing, so kind of one thing led to another, really.
And what kind of a writer are you? Are you the kind of writer who has everything kind of panned out in advance, and then you just, or is it constantly changing?
Not really, no. I tend to just roughly know the characters and what I want to kind of get off my chest. But then I don't know where it's going. I don't write treatments usually, unless I'm forced to write one. I usually just write from A to B, and I don't know I didn't know Fatma Mohamed's character was going to burgle Gwendoline Christie. That just kind of happened, and I kind of went along with it, really.
And when you're actually shooting, how much room is there to change then, or is that completely locked, or are things still evolving as well?
No, things change. I mean, if you look at the Moose, there it is. It's that one there, actually. The Moose performance, that was not working in the sound mix. It was just too much. I think one of the sound mixers is here. The sound designer, Tim Harrison. Where are you, Tim?
Tim here?
Oh, there he is.
I think you should.
Round of applause for Tim.
Yeah. Give a little,
So it just, I don't know, the more we were adding, the less effective it was. So eventually we just stripped it right back. And I think Raoul Brand, the mixer, he had someone helping with his childcare, a German actor, and she came in to read some stuff I wrote. So that was very improvised at the last minute. I mean, Tim, again, I think the whole Foley thing for the trip to the shops, Tim had this idea of having Foley for actions that don't exist. So, but on set, what I would do, I would tend to leave in mistakes. That's more what would happen. Fatma would make mistakes in her English. Like she'd say white dreams instead of wet dreams. It's just much more poetic to say white dreams. But otherwise, no, there's not much time for improvisation because it's a 14-day shoot. So you just kind of get on with it, really.
And I mean, I think most people would be pretty astonished to learn it was a 14-day shoot, which in film terms is tiny. Does that mean you have any room within that period for rehearsal leading up to it and so forth? And how, in reality, were there things you had to leave out because you couldn't achieve them? Yeah,
we left out a lot. There was a whole character we left out. Just couldn't do it. It was just impossible.
The character that was cast and everything as well.
Yeah, it was very, very heartbreaking. Just the way it is. There was a whole sub-story involved. Not sub as in submissive, by the way, but just as in, in case you're wondering. So I think it was... Yeah, it was... We had rehearsal time, though. We had about a week, I think, to rehearse, or a little bit less.
And you also, I remember when you were on this stage when we were doing a project here in kind of May, June time last year, and you were literally jumping onto a train to go up to Yorkshire to go and do your recce's and so forth. But that was still, we're still in pandemic now, but it was still in a period of pandemic where things were still being particularly careful. That must have affected it on a 14-day shoot stuff as well, the COVID regulations, didn't it?
It wasn't that. In terms of the speed, it was pretty fast. It was more the stress of every test. It's oh my God, what's going to happen now? We were pretty lucky. No one really got ill. Technical assistant Vim, his stepdaughter got ill, so we had to replace him at the very last minute, which is why you have a name actor like Leo Bill. It's very difficult to convince a name actor to be a what do they call them?
Supporting role?
Yeah, supporting featured extra, that's it, featured extra. But he just did it. He was very kind. He got on the train at the last minute. But I think the hardest thing was getting crew. It was very, very difficult because there was like a bottleneck of filming then.
Yeah.
And we had 4 false starts before, so this was going on for quite a while.
But you also got some pretty big name actors, and I'm guessing from a budget point of view, they're not actors who normally would have been affordable from what the budget would have been.
Maybe there was no other work for them. I don't know. I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
I think you're being too modest, but I suspect that it was, they took a pretty low rate because they liked the script and wanted to work with you.
They might have changed their minds after this film, but yeah, let's see. Yeah.
And in terms of like the look of the film and stuff, for example, all of Gwendoline Christie's outfits and the costumes were all designed for her, weren't they?
That was Giles Deacon. And Stephen Jones, the hats, was milliner. What's the verb? What's the noun for milliner? That's it, milliner. I can never say that word. That was pretty much, they were kind of collaborating amongst each other. I'm not really knowledgeable on these things. So, my only brief was don't turn up in jeans, and I kind of left them to it, really. And Saffron Culane and Emily Newby did the other costumes, which, I was pretty good, actually, I thought, with the costumes. Sorry to have no modesty there, but yeah.
And you touched on before about the Sonic Catering band, the band that you have been part of.
They were pretty good as well, actually, yeah.
For people who are not aware of the kind of their kind of output, could you just say something about it and how that does feed into the film?
Well, we just, what you've been paying for is what you would have seen. That's what we did, really. No one had heard of us. So I kind of like the idea because, usually these films are reserved for epic bands like Queen or Elton John. So I just thought, what is the most egotistical thing I can do to make a film about a band that nobody's heard of? I was kind of into that idea of embracing the ego and, I like Peter Greengrass. He's a great director.
Anyway.
I like The Born Identity. That's a really good film.
Sorry,
sorry,
but I almost ruined it. Sorry.
He's great, Greengrass.
It's the only film I can think about.
Which one? The Born Pardon me?
Sorry. No, but The Belly of an Architect. It was It was about a very famous architect, but then it was underscored with the fact that he was very preoccupied with his own physical health, and there was some sort of gastrointestinal kind of issue to it. So I was just wondering, I don't think I've ever seen any film like this, so it just made me think a little bit about that.
Yeah, Glenn Branca did the soundtrack to that film. I mean, architect, not Born Identity, but yeah. No, I mean, I do like that film. I haven't seen it in a long time. So it was not really on my mind so much. I mean, I have seen it. I've seen his other film. Well, no, I haven't seen his later stuff. But that whole run up to the film where he went too far in 1993, I kind of stopped there.
The Baby in the Corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a film. I'm sure there are other films as well. Yeah. Okay, so this is not the first film. Okay, second film.
I mean, it's interesting. I think I think you do have some similarities with a filmmaker like Peter Greenaway in terms of a very kind of a unique filmmaker who is not allowed themselves to be kind of by pushed around by the money people. You've got a very unique vision, and you kind of sort of stick to it. I mean, would you say that there are sort of similarities there, or is that kind of going a bit far?
Well, I'm a bit scared to say that because look what happened to him.
He's still making films now.
True,
He's making a film next month, actually.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you got a retrospective coming up, actually?
Do you know, I'm so delighted you said that. We do have a retrospective.
I felt this is
coming up.
you connected.
I just love Peter Greenaway.
Conspiracy. This is a conspiracy.
From the end of October throughout to December, we will be playing all of his films.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was a fan. I mean, absolutely. Both Greenaway and Jarman, that whole period.
Yeah.
I mean, think of Ken Russell, Rogue. Okay, Palin Pressburgers before, but yeah, I was massively into that when I started in the early 90s. But then everything changed around 1994. Jarman died. Greenaway was kind of moving towards somewhere else.
His European phase.
His European phase. That place called Europe. Yeah. Yeah, if I say whatever I say, it either sounds like I'm bragging or not bragging, or well, it's something to brag about, to be honest. It's I mean, all I would say is I don't want to get into what it's tricky because obviously I incriminate other people as well. Don't believe everything you see. That's all I will say.
I'll take that.
I think part of this was okay. If you're going to deal with something loosely autobiographical, you've got to make yourself look bad. Otherwise, it's going to end in tears. But I was interested in films like, I love that film, it's such a long title, but The Decline of the Western Civilization, Part 2, The Middle Years, there you go, by Penelope Spheris, which is one of the best films made about men. Just that whole stereotype of having an orgy. And when I spoke to Fatma about this, it was like something a bit like drugs. It's like good for your CV. It's not something you particularly enjoy doing. But it's great for everyone to know you did it. For her character in that world. I'm not talking about where we are now. I was ripping off Pasolini's Salo with the... Well, mind you, Pasolini was ripping off other things. It was a very typical 3-act structure, but especially with the whole, you have the circle of, is it blood and the circle of shit and so on. And I think within that, I wanted to have this repetition that was very similar to a lot of the music we were listening to as a band. We were listening to, obviously, Terry Riley, Steve Reich, and so on, Alvin Lucier, Robert Ashley. So that very repetitive element.
Raw minimalism.
Yeah, so having patterns, modulations, things that would repeat again and again. So every chapter had to have an orgy, a trip to the shops, a after-dinner speech, and a thinking walk, and so on. And within that, you kind of, I guess you modulate what is going on. And I really enjoy that kind of way of doing things. I mean, I guess I grew up watching a lot of American underground stuff, which had similar structure. But I'm aware that it's not very popular. It doesn't have an arc. It doesn't have a trajectory. I can never say that word, trajectory. Yeah. You know what I mean. So, but yeah, I love that in film. I mean, you mentioned our friend Pete. His films had that sense of repetition. So yeah, I really enjoy that. It's really hard to know at what point. I mean, I know it's hard to know in terms of the actual page number, but you know it's going well when it kind of writes itself, when characters do things that you don't tell them to do. That's the best thing about writing, that you don't know where it's going, and it kind of leads you along. It varies. I mean, what I do know, it takes a long time to get into that world. It takes days, sometimes weeks. It sometimes takes days to get out of that world. Because I write for hire on the side. I'm a hack, like in the film. And so I have quite a few writing jobs back to back. And you have to just snap out of the world you're in and get into a new world.
I think that's a good point to start talking. So we thought this was your most recent film, but actually you have an even more recent film, which is Blank Narcissus.
Oh.
And you made that this year, in fact, I believe.
Yeah, we made it pretty much after we finished Flux Gourmet. We had some spare film looking around, not quite. It was a commission from an Australian company called Prototype, Lauren Carroll Harris. So I asked Serena and Pietro, who produced Flux, if they want to get on board. Pretty much a lot of the same people from Flux got involved. And I just wanted to, I really got into commentaries. I almost had them as podcasts. I wouldn't even watch the film. I just lie down with my portable DVD player, fall asleep, and have the commentary in my headphones. And there's a great one by Coppola, which was made The Godfather. He went to the toilet, and two crew members came in, not knowing he was in there, started, slagging him off, which is normal. That happens to all film directors. That's nothing unusual. And they were saying what a bad film is going to be. But what was so interesting was not that, it was just the hurt in his voice after 40 years. You could see how vulnerable he was. And it kind of opened up this thing of how, when I'm here, I'm supposed to tell you how great it was making the film, selling it to you. Whereas a DVD commentary, usually it's more confessional. And usually, quite often, these these restored films where it's older directors in their 70s and 80s looking back on something, on youth really, and time having long since passed. And there's something very melancholic I could really tap into there. That's how it started.
And
really.
you chose a very particular kind of genre of film to do your DVD commentary with.
Gay porno, basically. Yeah.
So so what you, I mean, obviously we're about to watch it now, but you kind of, I guess, had to create something that was meant to be obviously a recreation from the past, which actually is quite a challenge I would have thought to do, isn't it?
Well, aspects of
16 look vintage, and
Yeah, aspects of 16mm looks so good now. It didn't look that good 50 years ago. So we used 16mm and it still looked too crisp. And I guess, I was really into that certain period of people like James Bidgood, Wakefield Poole, the Kuchar brothers. They're not really porn, but still in that kind of world. Jack Smith, all making films in their apartments in New York and creating this very exotic other world, heavily steeped in artifice. So really it was like a celebration of that world, which is so kind of vibrant and just out there, really. It was nothing quite like it.
Well, thank you very much for letting us have the opportunity to watch it. We're going to watch it now.
Yeah, well, this looks more like a tight fit video than a James Bidgood film, but still, we tried.
But a big thank you for being here today. Peter Strickland, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.